Okay, so we have a lot of discussion to go here, and we are now joined by my friend out of Georgia, Ashley McMahon, the ladies who law, and you law so well. Welcome back. Nice to see you. Happy New Year.
Thank you. Happy New Year. Good to be here.
Okay, so the social worker here, the CPS worker, is telling us that here are the requirements. If you pass the drug screen, which the prosecution later said Daniel passed only because he was using his son's urine, and obviously Daniel denied that, and you don't have any violent convictions, you're eligible to be reunified because it's the best interest of the family to have you together with your dad hugging. Tell me about how this worked out, Ashley.
I mean, this policy is absolute garbage. If you've got the mother of this precious little baby Dylan that is testing positive for drugs, testing positive even when she's, going into labor, and poor baby Dylan showing signs within 12 hours of withdrawal symptoms from these drugs that were already in his system that he got in utero, the concept of reunification should not apply in this particular case. And as we can see, this is exactly how it turned out. He ended up at the bottom of a well, murdered, admittedly, by his own mother. This is just horrible all around. It's a garbage policy that Child Protective Services has.
Chad Young, do you agree that it's a garbage policy? Because I certainly agree in this circumstance, in this case.
Well, yes, in this circumstance, in this case, do I agree in general that it's not a good idea whenever it is safe for the child to reunite them with their birth parents? No, I think that's a good goal. It's a good theory. You just have to work a lot harder than they worked in this case to make sure that a child is protected.
Yeah, but Joseph Marrone, Chad had the right word, safe to reunify. How could you tell it's safe to reunify? There's no DNA testing on the urine to see whether it indeed is the father versus the son. There's no cameras in that house 24/7. How do you know it's really safe when you have what happened here with this child being born drug addicted, where the mom, who was living with the dad, didn't take any responsibility even going into birth that she was on drugs?
Well, obviously they didn't have policies and procedures to prevent this, and I would have an issue with the fact the foster mother objected to this. She raised various concerns. I think the agency owed a duty to everyone, including that child, to do more due diligence and have stages to make sure, okay, that these parents were fit to have this child in their home, and they did none of that. They just took for granted because the urine was clean, and they didn't even check they did nothing other than just run a simple urine test. And then additionally, they said, oh, well, his criminal record is not violent, therefore just turn the baby over and forget about everything else. I mean, they realized that was a big mistake. I mean, there was definitely gross negligence here, and hopefully this will cause the agency to change their policies and procedures in the future and save future lives.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, Joseph just mentioned the foster mom. Let's listen to Andrea Bowling discuss this in the courtroom. So here we have it. The foster mom, who CPS obviously thinks now has an interest because she loves the child and wants to take care of it, says that the mom, the biological mom, really wasn't acknowledging that she was under the influence. Ashley McMahon. And indeed, the father then wasn't turning in the mom to say she's under the influence, didn't turn in the mom when she was doing heroin during the pregnancy. How indeed could these two get this child back, who ended up in a well in 2 milk cartons with chains wrapped around him, zip ties, and rocks?
I mean, Andrea Bowling, this woman's testimony, you'd have to be made of stone not to be moved by her love for this baby that ended up, under these tragic circumstances, being placed back with parents that are clearly unfit to take care of him. And, it just goes to show you that, look, we all know that these government agencies and the Child Protective Services are overworked and understaffed, but they really dropped the ball on this one.
Yeah, and indeed, Joseph Marrone, one of the things I find myself when I listen to and think about this child in the well this way, people get upset on abusive corpses, and normally I think it may be a little bit of an over-upset, but not in this case. This is pretty awful and damning, isn't it?
Yeah, to know that not only that you killed your infant, but you put your infant basically in the well and you're going to go about your business. It's sitting down there in a milk crate, tied up, no matter, even though you know that the infant is now deceased. That if that doesn't play on your mind, what kind of human being are you? And it speaks volume to these individuals of what they're really about. And I think the jury understood that, and the judge understood that. It's sad because this poor foster mother was somewhat crying out. She got to see the parents for 5 minutes. I mean, where's the policies and procedures? Where's the counseling? Nothing.
Nothing.
And it's a shame. And then ultimately, you know, you can see what happens.
Oh, but they have this policy, Chad, of reunification. Now, I've heard that there are cases out there where different child protective services agencies are trying to reunify alleged sexual abusers with their children, you know, whether they're in jail or not in jail. How do we get to this policy of reunification? I know it's good when everything is good and you want to put families back together, but how do we get there that it applies in every single case, including this one?
Well, there's never going to be one policy fits all for putting a child in a healthy, loving environment. It's just not going to happen. What we see in this case is all the red flags that we're missing. If all the red flags would have been noticed in this case, that were there, that were present, a mother who seemed to be high when she came for her parent visit, that's a giant red flag that was missed in this case. So if all the red flags had been caught and had been acted upon properly, I don't think we'd be sitting here discussing this case today.
Well, we're going to give baby Dylan his due even more after this break. Stay tuned. More on the Groves trial, sentencing. They're going to jail for a long time, and little baby Dylan. So Ashley McMahon, I believe that her mind wasn't clear because of drugs, but her attorney got up an opening and said she murdered her child. She caused the fractures on the arm and the 2 skull fractures, and she gets on the stand and says, I don't remember it. I mean, the jury's not going to like her very much to start with, and then you have this.
It's pretty hard to get past that inflammatory opening statement that her attorney made. But, you know, Linda, I have to say it is a sad state of affairs when in the United States of America, you would be hard pressed to find a single person who has not been affected in some way by drug addiction, either through a family member or a close friend or, you know, some sort of connection. So I think if you get jurors that, you know, you're able to shift the blame towards the addiction, and if you get any jurors on there that can identify with that and sympathize with it, I think that's the only defense that they can really go with in this case.
So Joseph Marrone, Ashley's right. I remember when I first started trying cases, it was hush, hush. Anyone in your family have drugs? You know, and the hush, hush, they went to sidebar. Now you ask that question, everybody raises their hand because everyone's been impacted. But when you have a defendant, a witness here like she did, who doesn't seem to own up to it, does that like contradict the sympathy you may feel because you know what drugs do?
Listen, I don't know. I think the defense attorney may have dropped the ball here. I mean, listening to her, I mean, there was no doubt there's a lot of evidence that she was a serious heroin addict, and there's a serious diminished capacity defense. If she truly doesn't remember it and understand what she did, I mean, there may be an issue here that should have been raised and was, you know, she may have a major appealable issue. I don't know if they had an expert that they were considering. None of those things were done. And I'd have it, you know, I do believe that this woman was a serious heroin addict. I do believe she doesn't realize what she was doing. I believe it was the heroin that overwhelmed her body, and it was an ongoing addiction. So, you know, I have to question the defense here. I'm really concerned about it.
So, Chad, I see you in the corner of my eye. You are going, yes, 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 yes. Tell me why you agree with Joseph.
Well, because of what he just said. If she did not understand the ramifications of her actions at the time that she was doing it, if she did not know she was dropping this child, if she did not know what she was doing, that should be explored, because that could possibly change the type of sentence. I'm not going to say it's going to make her innocent of murder, but it could change the type of sentence that she gets.
So let's listen now to what Daniel said about himself and his drug use in the family, in the house where baby Dylan eventually ended up. Let me ask you the ultimate question, Joseph Marrone. Should he have testified with the defense attorney for the mom getting on and saying, hey, she did it all? Should he have testified?
Well, listen, if you listen to him, I think he helps himself. He does have some acceptable parenting skills that he talked about. Talks about having a drug habit, but when he had those acceptable parenting skills, he probably was sober. So it goes back to what I originally said. I think it's the mother who was severely high on heroin. Her actions she doesn't remember. I think obviously he has a level of responsibility here, because he's the one that started the whole thing with the fake urine. But I don't think if you would have tried this case properly, that they should have been found guilty of premeditated murder, when in turn they should have been found guilty of a lesser charge.
That's really interesting. Ashley McMahon, Joseph is basically saying you could defend against probably the fractures by saying they may have been post-mortem and that the baby died maybe from a drug overdose, and that would be defensible, as opposed to saying, yeah, I murdered my baby, but I don't remember how, and then the father gets sucked in. So could the father have avoided this liability if he had not, according to the prosecution, lied about where the urine came from? Now, he says he didn't, but the prosecution said he did.
I agree with Joseph on this. I think the defense for Jessica has made a severe misstep, and there's a lot of things that could have been done differently in this trial. But I do think that Daniel comes off sympathetic on the stand. He seems very open. He seems very honest, and I think this case could have turned out a lot differently if he didn't initially lie about the urine, but I don't know that we're ever going to get to see what that outcome would have been.
What about if he didn't admit helping put the baby in the 2 milk cratons, putting the rocks in, chaining the baby, putting zip ties on the crates, putting chains around them, and dropping them down the well?
I actually think him admitting that he helped kind of cover up the killing of the baby could potentially make him a little bit more sympathetic, and that he's guilty of loving his wife to such a degree that he has overlooked so many red flags along the way and really has done everything to try and save her from herself. It's just unfortunate the way that everything has turned out in the end.
Well, you still have a real victim, Chad Young. You have a 14-year-old who for a while was placed by CPS with the aunt and uncle. We don't know what's going to happen there. But that 14-year-old has basically lost his whole family. And that doesn't seem to be thought of by anybody, did it?
Right. And, this father of this child, he's not an innocent man. Is he guilty of murder? Well, maybe not. But he definitely has some culpability and some liability in the death of this child.
Do you think that the milk carton, just yes or no, put him over the top for a conviction?
Yes.
Okay. So we have it there from our great guests, Ashley McMahon, Joseph Marrone, Chad Young, have been with me. As you can know, the Law and Crime, tune in every day. You have the most fantastic guests, real trial attorneys. But next, you know what's coming up next? Aaron Keller in the Daily Debrief. And he's going to be discussing cases we are watching, including the Weinstein jury selection, including the Hartung jury selection, including the verdicts we had this week and the convictions we had this week in Groves and the Bonilla plea. Only here at the Law and Crime Network will you get this type of critique of trials, of defenses. We are the best. I say it modestly because we are a Dan Abrams network and the best crew behind us producing us. I'm Linda Kenney Baden. I'll see you on the Daily Debrief. Please stay with us. Aaron Keller next.